I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you are looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you.
Praise Nancy! Gods be praised for Nancy. Oh my god, I would have been so screwed if it wasn't for our little crawfish friend. She's so pretty. She's so pretty. I hated her. I wanted to eat her at first, but at this point in the game, holy god, Nancy has gotten me through some of the most insane boss fights that I don't even understand how they're getting there. I mean, I kind of do. But it might be a little late in the game for me to fix it at this point. I don't know, man. We have a lot to get through. This is going to be 2 days worth of gameplay. Approximately like 12 hours-ish of game that we're going to fit into this TDP because I was busy yesterday. But we're going to get there. I left you guys... I left you guys as I approached... I'm still going to get their names wrong. It's like Goro, Masami, and Syrian? Something like that. So it's the double boss fight that was multi-phased. I got to this on Friday. I had one try at it where it just escalated massively because the immediate thing I noticed is just the huge amount of damage these guys put out, which led you into a circle of trying to heal. And they also have so many turns because it's turn-based combat, right? They have a lot more turns than you that they could just one-shot me, essentially, in their turn, even at full health, which was very scary. And then you fight 2 of them. Like 50%, a second boss joins, and they both give themselves damage amplifications. If you debuff them, they have so many turns that their debuffs kind of run out. And by the time you get back to your debuffer, and you reapply, they don't get to do much. So it was a really tough fight. So that's where we're starting. I will say I did kill this next try by being extra safe. I played extra safe. My big goal was to get Goro down. I did not one-shot it. That's a lie. That is a total lie. I think I did it on my 3rd try. To figure out what I wanted to do. It was tough. It was very, very tough. I had to go slow and steady, but I had a few moves that were actually relatively effective against these targets to actually do good damage, and I really started to lean far more heavily on consumables, which are now like mandatory at this point of the game, at least for me. There is a solution to this, because you're going to notice, like with the bosses we're going to fight here, they're way, way higher level than I am. Now, I haven't skipped much of the game at all. I've done most mini-games. I've found, I think, every mini-game, including the underground casinos, which play, like, very bizarre Japanese games, which one of them, Koi Koi, I just did not understand what the hell was going on there. I got the premise, kind of, but then it went into all sorts of weird stuff with, like, moon viewing. You've lost. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. All sorts of weird stuff like that. So I think I found pretty much everything. I've also pretty much upgraded my weapons to the point where if I wanted to go further, and I can, I would have to do quite a bit of farming in order to fix that. I would have to like spend a lot of time in the arena, I think, and get that stuff. So I'm kind of as strong as I can be, is how I feel about it. I've done every side quest in the game, done them all that's available to me, every single one. Dragon Cart still hasn't unlocked to finish that off. But there's nothing else on the map. I've done every part-time hero. I haven't done every collectathon, but let's just say I've done most of the game. And at this point in the main story, where typically in an RPG, you are over-leveled compared to the main story because you've done so much side content. Not here. I'm going to end up, in some cases, like 10 levels below the actual bosses and stuff. I'm not quite sure what they intended you to do here. It's not just level other jobs, I don't think, which you can obviously do to add more skills to your characters, because it's your overall level that's low. But by the by, it means we're going to have very hard fights, and I'm totally okay with that. I don't just want to squash them. I don't want that Expedition 33 experience. So it worked out pretty well. So this fight was really tough, and what was cool about it is how the story then unfolded. The story has taken a big leap in the last time we've played, and we have to talk, before we get to the point that a lot of people were so excited for that I didn't know was coming, about the actual twist of the story. Because the story is proceeding as you would expect, where there's grand plans within plans within plans, And the big story arc was the dissolution of the Yakuza. They're dissolving the Omi clan and they're dissolving the Tojo clan. And this was all based around the release of the leader of the Omi, because Arakawa, Papi Arakawa was the acting captain, but the genuine captain has now been released from prison. They're waiting for this day to announce to all the Yakuza, it's like, we're dissolving the Yakuza because, frankly, you can't really be a Yakuza anymore. The rules, the legal system, everything has been turned so far against them in terms of what they aim to do and what they're supposed to be. My gut feeling on this, and again, it's more of a cultural thing in Japan that I'm not super aware of, is that it's becoming more and more just like we're becoming mafioso illegal people instead of also like being honorable and protecting the streets and things like that. Which is what they kind of signed up for. They were always in the gray zone, which is mentioned a lot in the game, but at this point they might as well just be drug runners and things like that, because everything they do is kind of illegal and frowned upon, and they can't really operate as they want to do. So the decision has been made by the chairmans to just dissolve the Yakuza and everybody go about their business. These hundreds, century-old institution needs to come to an end. And that happens. But obviously there's fallout and power vacuums that now take place, right? Because all these Yakuza soldiers, the footmen, are all like, well, we didn't want this to end, so screw you. And this ends up ultimately with the death of Arakawa, which is very, very likely, and does turn out to be true, has been ordered by his son. Which we talked about a few days ago. It's like, you fully expect this kid is just not okay with any sort of friction against his plans. And Arakawa did not do what he wanted to do and has had him killed. But you can't prove it yet. But you suspect, and obviously Ichi is very upset about this. This leads on to an absurdity that is so absurd that it could only work in this game, I think, ever, right? In the current franchises that exist, major franchises, there might be another franchise that comes along that can allow this to be a thing, but it fits so much here, because I did get those questions like, how do you feel about what they just did? And I said, and this would never work in like Final Fantasy, this would never work in Chrono Trigger, this would never work in any other similar style RPG besides Yakuza, but it works perfectly here and it's okay. What is the story? You might remember on day, 4, I said, I'm pretty sure that it's going to turn out that Ichiban is Arakawa's son. There was a lot of flags pointing to that, because there's such a tightly written story, and we've talked about it so many times, is that if a story is done very well, the clues are there to a revelation that if you're thinking about it a lot, which we have done, it would make sense, instead of what's happened in the last decade, where people leave all these breadcrumbs, but then they go, but wait, and we get phrases like subvert expectations, which just means well, there was no breadcrumbs for this because you just wanted a weird twist at the end. Yakuza is so filled with twists, but they all fit, and the flags and the breadcrumbs are all there. So it does reveal that Ichiban is Arakawa's son. And it's done in a really interesting way, because apparently there's a lot of babies in lockers. In Camacho, you can't open a locker at a station without there being a baby in it. Is what's going on. You know what it reminded me of, where it didn't work, and they tried to pull this off. You guys might not have seen it. It was Fantastic Beasts. I know, very, very swift departure from Yakuza, but the Fantastic Beasts movies did this story arc of where there was a boat crossing from, I think, England to the US, and on that boat, what just coincidentally was Dumbledore and somebody else. I can't remember who it is. It was the lady. I'm not a big Harry Potter guy. It was the Lestranges, I think, who both happened to have babies on board, magical babies. And on that trip, they got switched or something like that, because one cried and one didn't. And everybody was like, what? This is so stupid, right? And it turns out that, I can't remember who the protagonist was. It was the guy who played, it was Ezra Miller. It was the guy who played the Flash. Is actually a Dumbledore and all this kind of stuff. And everyone was like, what? Wait, they were just on this boat. But that happens here, and you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. That totally works. What happened there? So Shirasawa, who is the Shiraishiwa's the captain or lieutenant or whatever of the Arakawa, now Omi, who is sent by Daddy Arakawa to be the new protector to his son. And as he points out, in my world, Aoki's orders are law, including killing the chairman of the Seiyuu clan, the old man, Hiroshima, which is, we get the message that the Seiyuu clan headquarters is under attack. They're going to kill the chairman. We have to get there. We get there, and then we get an interesting comment from Shiraishiwa. Is like, you're too late, Ichiban. You're always just slightly too late. No matter what I ask of you, you're too late. Which is a weird line I did notice. And then you get into the fight with him. Very tough fight again. But once we bring him down, the story is then revealed. And the story is, at the exact same time that Arakawa Sr. had his child, but he was going to be killed and they were coming for him. And that's when they made the decision, his lady made a decision to put the baby on a locker and there'd be a handoff to someone else. At the exact same time, Shiraishiwa, before he joins the Yakuza, has also had a child. And it turns out that Shiraishiwa is just an absolute piece of crap forever. Like, since he was young. He's just an awful person who wants nothing more than to get an abortion. There's a line in here, I forget, I think it's something like, I dreamed that we would have a miscarriage, or I prayed for it, or something like that. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is horrible. So they also end up putting their baby in the lockers as well. Coincidentally, directly next to the other locker. So we've got Arakawa's child and Shiraishiwa's child in lockers, 99 and 100, directly next to each other. And as that happens, Arakawa comes running down the street and hears a baby cry and beats the door open. And what the baby he finds is Shiraishiwa's child, which turns out to be Aoki. So Aoki is not an Arakawa. He's actually Shiraishiwa's child. And from there, Shiraishiwa stalks Arakawa to keep an eye on his child, sees he's disabled and things like that, and ultimately joins the Yakuza and rises the ranks, right? So that's why he knows that Aoki is his son. That's why he's so fully dedicated to, and it all fits, right? The pieces all fit. At the same time, the people from Soplan show up to pick up the other baby, which is supposed to be Shiraishiwa's child, and actually get Arakawa's child, which is Ichiban, and take him to the Soplan. So Arakawa raises Shiraishiwa's son with Shiraishiwa watching, whereas Ichiban, who is actually Arakawa's son, gets raised in the Soplan and eventually joins the same Yakuza family. And as far as I gather, and this totally makes sense to me, Arakawa never knew. He totally thought Aoki was his real son. He did not know Ichiban was his son, but he could see something in him. There was some connection there, which makes sense. There's obviously resemblance. But the way Ichiban acts is far more in keeping with Arakawa himself, and that was the son he always wanted, which we talked about a long time ago, right? So it all does turn out to be the case. As Shiraishiwa just explains, I'm the worst person ever. I am just the absolute awful person. And it's a very just like, are you kidding me moment? But also like, yeah, this totally fits for Yakuza. Absolutely bananas stuff. Absolutely bananas. It was a great, great big story point that we were like, wait a minute, it's going to happen? No way! It totally happens. Along with like the death of the chairman, because everything's going tits up now. And everybody wants to now run the Yakuza. They're forming a new alliance and Aoki's doing stuff. And at the same time, Ichiban is also now running for politician against Bleach Japan's Kume, in order to, like, not allow them to gain power in Ichincho, right? So this is the way they're going to disrupt power, is by having Ichiban run against him and lose popularity and things like that. So all this is happening in the story, and it's phenomenal. But there's a big moment that happens here, which I think, if I was a diehard Yakuza fan, this would have been infinitely better than... I wish not to say it wasn't bad, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is I didn't get the level of appreciation of what happened here compared to if I was a long-term fan of this franchise, which obviously I haven't played a lot of the other games, but this was a huge moment, I think, for a lot of Yakuza fans. But I completely got why this was happening. And I think the chapter is actually called Passing the Torch, because it's the end of Kiryu's storyline. Like, he's done, right? And I did play a game with Kiryu a long time ago. I think it's Yakuza 6 I played. But this is the point where it's now Ichiban's franchise. You're taking the reins, and Kiryu's going to pass the torch. And in order to do that, you have to prove that you are worthy of fighting, of being as strong, as tough, and also, more importantly, in the vein of, like, certainly compared to the current Superman that just came out, for those of you who've seen that, it's a very similar style, have the honor and the courage and the hope to do right. Because with the death of Arakawa, the death of the chairman, Ichiban blames himself because it's actually Surishawa who calls in the tip that the chairman's going to die, and that's why he's saying it's too late. He wanted him to stop him doing it. Is that Ichiban's lost his mind. He like goes into this very, very overly aggressive beatdown of a street thug where, you know, even the party's like, you've got to stop Ichi. And he's like, I'll stop when I stop. And his fists are covered in blood and stuff until Kiryu turns up. And he's like, you're not ready for what needs to happen here to carry this franchise, essentially. You're not ready. You're too angry. You're too filled with rage and hate. And you're going to make bad decisions. And that's not okay. So the showdown with Kiryu, this was phenomenal, but so hard. so hard. This fight, if it was the only way I beat this fight, and I think some people were a little annoyed that I one-shot it, which I did, but I used the experience that I gained in the previous Goro fight of like how to manage this kind of process, because he goes through many stages where he has dragon stance, beast stance, all kinds of different powerful stances which can kill you. Was Nancy. Poison is flat out broken in this game, which is very good for me. Poison, I assumed, very similar to other debuffs and things, that Poison had a turn duration. So if you poison somebody, you would get, 4 or 5 turns and then it would wear off. It does not work that way. It is an infinite debuff until the enemy naturally has a phase change where it will clear all its debuffs. But if you reapply it, it's on infinitely until they have a story-based moment where they'll clear it. Other than that, it just stays on forever. He hits so hard and with AoE that essentially I was just pumping heals and very few attacks and keeping him debuffed and all that kind of stuff just to try and live through the damage this boss did. It was insane. We were popping mana potions, group-wide heals, everything to stay alive. But what we did have was poison. And poison was so good because poison ticks every single time the enemy takes a turn, and because he can do 2 or 3 turns and then give you 1 turn and then take another 2 or 3 turns, poison just ticked and ticked and ticked and ticked. It was just all the time. Where if it was a weaker enemy who only gets 1 turn per round like the rest of us, it wouldn't do much. Against an enemy that's getting multiple turns every time we change character, it worked so tremendously well that it just ticked and ticked and ticked. I would imagine Nancy on the damage meter was like 80% of the damage. And it was great. I was so happy. I was like, because I honestly, I'll be straight up. If it wasn't for poison, I have no idea how I beat this fight without just endless consumables to try and keep us alive and keep our mana high. Because every attack, I tried every damage source I had available in my team. One thing I do know, and I want to be clear on this, is I can swap team members like Final Fantasy X. I can swap them in. I don't like any of my other teammates, really. So I want my party to win. It's just my own personal choice. I just want that team that's been, that I'd really like to win. Although I am feigning on Hongji. I'm going to get his name wrong. I always get his name wrong. I call him Binbag, and he's one of the names I always get wrong. Purely because, not because of how he plays or his combat. I like that. It's speaking to him. Makes me want to shoot myself in the goddamn head. His bond, I get dread down my spine whenever we have a bond level increase, and I have to go and listen to him speak. It's awful. I hate it so much. He's got this dry, monotone, yes. And it's so serious, and it's such a history lesson every time. It's like, oh my god. It's a killer, because they're really long. It wouldn't be too bad if they were reasonably short. Some of his dialogue scenes are like 10, 12 minutes long of just him like rabbiting on about the mafia and all this stuff and his history, and he pretends to be who he is because he's a body double. All that stuff. So the fight with Kiryu was epic. What I wasn't expecting is that the finale of this fight you get knocked back, and then suddenly you are in knight's armor, and Kiryu has turned into a dragon, and it goes full Dragon Quest. And I was like, what is happening? This is like Final Fantasy 16 at this point. Like, come to me, Ifrit. I was like, what is going on here? And it plays out this big cutscene of the showdown as the torch is passed, because now Ichiban is calm. He's settled. He's centered again. He's ready to think about, as best he can, because he is still a dummy, of the choices to make and all that kind of stuff. And you can really feel the resolution happening. And now the torch has passed, because Kiryu is like, I have a contract. I cannot be here. I cannot exist. There's definitely a lot of people who know who Kiryu is. Songhui was just like, I know who you are. And he's like, yeah, you keep that to yourself. You keep that to yourself. I was never here, and I can't be here. Otherwise, this causes massive amounts of problems. And yeah, like Goro knows who he is. Like, there's several people who know who he is, but they don't mention it. Like, it's not okay to say that Kiryu is here. I thought it was a really touching moment. I just wish I had that level of appreciation for a lot of Yakuza fans of like, wow, this is really saying goodbye and also passing it on. Very, very just heartwarming moment. But I think that sums up, without going into too much detail, of what we've did in the last 12 hours, as we're reaching some sort of... I keep thinking we're near the end, and then something else happens. Like, they're mentioning now we need to go back to Kamurocho. So I don't know if we're halfway through the game. I don't think we are. And I'm basing that off the fact that, like, a lot of stuff is done in the game. And we're kind of, my like, weapons facility is fully upgraded. There's, like, 1 or 2 upgrades possible, which require a ton of money. There's a lot of things now that are like seem more like end game, post game type things. If you wanted to grind your characters, cap all the jobs, get all the best weapons, all that kind of stuff. So I do think we're near the end, and we've obviously been playing now for, I think we're at the 70-hour mark, maybe something like that. And it's here. I'll be so sad when it is over, but every moment, I cannot believe this game is this long. And hasn't really, besides the one dungeon, hasn't had a lull. That's absurd. There's no lull. Everything is just like relentless all the way through, of fun and objectives that you want to complete. Like, if I was going for full completion, there's so much stuff I want to do. I do have some targets I want to hit. I want to collect all the cats, because there's only 2 left. Like, I don't know where they are, but I want to find them. They might even be in a different town for all I know. I want to do that. I'm not super bothered about, like, farming the arena endlessly, unless there's some, like, really cool boss or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, a couple of little objectives I want to do. But other than that, man, where the story ends, I kind of hope that Ichiban doesn't become, like, a leader. It's not of, like, an actual political leader. Maybe he will. Maybe it'll be a bit more like Saints Row, where you end up, like, president or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I've got a smile on my face for 70 hours, man, and I'm still there. So, I don't know. Next time I talk to you, maybe we're finished. Maybe we're not. I don't know. But I'll let you know. But what a great day of combat, and shout outs to Nancy. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.